Chapter 128. Chu Xiu was now sure that the people from the morgue, the northern fluttering snow city, and the Blue Dragon Society were all looking for him. Chu Xiu wasn't sure if wind-sweeping buildings Lu Yu would leak the news that he was looking for old Huang. Therefore, he decided to set up a smokescreen here in advance. In fact, Chu Xiu's guess was right. Before the next day, the morgue and the northern fluttering snow city had joined hands to put out a bounty for Chu Xiu. Anyone who could provide any information about Chu Xiu would receive a bounty from the morgue and the northern fluttering snow city. Everyone was still confused. This blood demon, Chu Xiu, was the most famous assassin in the Blue Dragon Society's Heavenly Sin branch. He was ranked on the Longhu list. The morgue and the northern fluttering snow city were so brazenly putting out a bounty for Chu Xiu. How could the Heavenly Sin branch just sit back and do nothing? Afterwards, everyone heard that the Heavenly Sin branch wasn't just sitting back and doing nothing. Instead, they were already searching for Chu Xiu's whereabouts. The Heavenly Sin branch leader even left a message, dead or alive. As soon as this sentence came out, everyone immediately understood what the Heavenly Sin branch leader meant. At the same time, they shook their heads inwardly. This Chu Xiu was really bold. Not only did he offend the morgue and the northern fluttering snow city, but he also betrayed the Blue Dragon Society. However, the only thing that was strange was the Blue Dragon Society's attitude. Normally, if an assassin of the Blue Dragon Society betrayed the Blue Dragon Society, the branch leader would personally report to the headquarters and report the reason. Finally, after the traitor's name was removed, the branch leader would order all the assassins of the Blue Dragon Society to hunt down the traitor, leaving no place for the traitor. However, the Heavenly Sin branch leader didn't seem to have reported Chu Xiu's whereabouts to the Blue Dragon Society headquarters. He only sent the Heavenly Sin branch's people to search for Chu Xiu. This was quite strange. Actually, the reason was very simple. After all, it was division leader Heavenly Sin who had taken the initiative to scheme against Chu Xiu. Although the Azure Dragon Society's headquarters wouldn't punish a dignified division leader like him for something like that, as well as an expert in the realm of the unity of heaven and man, taking the initiative to scheme against a subordinate wasn't a good thing to say. He still wanted to return to the headquarters, and such a matter that would affect his reputation in the Azure Dragon Society was something that couldn't be known to the headquarters. Also, snatching the blood jade crystal this time wasn't in line with the rules of the Blue Dragon Society. The Blue Dragon Society was just an assassin organization. If you wanted to use the power of the Blue Dragon Society to do other things, it was fine. However, you had to report to the headquarters, and you had to get the headquarters' approval before you could do it. The process was quite troublesome. Most of the Blue Dragon Society branch leaders were like local tyrants. Of course, they didn't like the feeling of being restricted. Therefore, if they acted on their own, as long as it wasn't a big matter, they would basically never report to the headquarters. This kind of thing was an unspoken rule of the Blue Dragon Society. If you didn't say it, others wouldn't care. However, if Sky Crime Division leader reported this to the headquarters, then the headquarters would know that he acted on his own, and he would inevitably be reprimanded and punished. Right now, the three clans were chasing after Chu Xiu together. The momentum was already extremely shocking. At this time, in the Southern Swallow Divine Martial Sect, Yan Tingting received the news from the Divine Martial Sect's disciple. Her eyes were red, and they revealed endless hatred and killing intent. Although Yan Tingting was unruly and willful in the past, she was still lively. However, now her figure was thin, and she looked depressed. When the Yu clan was annihilated and Yu Luchuan died in the hands of Chu Xiu, Yan Tingting couldn't wait to kill Chu Xiu to avenge her beloved. However, because of the special nature of the Divine Martial Sect, Yan Huainan didn't allow her to cause trouble for Chu Xiu. Although Yan Tingting was the eldest daughter of the Divine Martial Sect, without Yan Huainan's orders, who would dare to help her? Therefore, even if Yan Tingting wanted to take revenge, she didn't have the power. She cried all day long, but she always paid attention to the news about Chu Xiu. Seeing that Chu Xiu was ranked on the Longhu leaderboard after annihilating the Yu clan, and had made a name for himself in the Eastern Yan martial world, she couldn't wait to kill Chu Xiu right now. However, it was a pity that she didn't have the power. Now that Chu Xiu was wanted by the Righteous Manor and the Northern Fluttering Snow City, and he was expelled from the Blue Dragon Society. Yan Tingting immediately saw an opportunity. Holding the news, Yan Tingting directly knocked on the door of Yan Huainan's secret room, where he was in seclusion. Everyone in the Divine Martial Sect knew that disturbing the sect leader's seclusion was a very serious matter. Even the elders of the Divine Martial Sect were afraid to see Yan Huainan's gloomy face. Yan Tingting was the only exception. The sect leader of the Divine Martial Sect, Yan Huainan, was a middle-aged man with a shocking aura. The lines on his face looked as if they had been chiseled by a knife and chiseled by an axe. People who looked at him would feel awe. Yan Huainan had single-handedly developed the Divine Martial Sect from an ordinary small sect into one of the 7 sects and 8 schools. He was ranked 37th on the Wind Cloud leaderboard. Whether it was in the Jianghu or in the sect, Yan Huainan was definitely an extremely powerful and ambitious person. However, no matter how powerful Yan Huainan was, he couldn't do so in front of his own daughter. Seeing Yan Tingting like this, he couldn't help but ask helplessly, "Tingting, what's wrong now?" Yan Tingting threw the news in her hand to Yan Huainan and said expressionlessly, "Previously, you were worried about the Blue Dragon Society and didn't want to hunt down Chu Xiu. Now that Chu Xiu has betrayed the Blue Dragon Society, you should be able to make your move, right?" Yan Huainan took the news and read it. A strange look immediately appeared in his eyes. To be honest, Yan Huainan didn't have any bad feelings toward Chu Xiu from the very beginning. He was even somewhat grateful to Chu Xiu. Yu Luchuan looked like a good-for-nothing. Apart from his good looks, there was nothing good about him. In the eyes of an ambitious person like Yan Huainan, he was basically a piece of trash. Unfortunately, there were so many young talents in the northern Yan land, but his daughter didn't like any of them. She didn't even like such an outstanding person like Nye Donglu. What else could he do? If it weren't for the fact that he was afraid that his daughter would hate him for the rest of her life if he killed Yu Luchuan, Yan Huainan would have made his move long ago. Now that Chu Xiu had helped him, although Yan Tingting had been depressed for a long time, Yan Huainan believed that time could wash away everything. Sooner or later, his daughter would forget about that pretty boy. However, Yan Huainan didn't expect that his daughter would still remember that pretty boy. Chu Xiu had already caused such a big commotion. Seeing the news in the news, Yan Huainan even admired Chu Xiu a little. In the Jianghu, one had to either endure or be ruthless. Yan Huainan wasn't the kind of person who would endure humiliation. On the contrary, he was ruthless and decisive. That was why he had led the Divine Force sect to fight for dozens of years, and become one of the 7 sects and 8 factions. Chu Xiu had dared to snatch things from the loyalty-gathering village and the drifting snow city in the far north, and he had even dared to plot against his superior. In Yan Huainan's eyes, this was already ruthless and decisive enough. If this man could survive this ordeal, he would definitely become someone great in the future. Of course, the prerequisite was that the other party had to be able to survive this ordeal. Throughout history, there had been many young talents in the Jianghu, and there were some who were more astonishing than Chu Xiu. However, there were even more who died prematurely. Geniuses who could survive were called outstanding people. Those who died prematurely were just dead people. Seeing that Yan Huainan didn't speak for a long time, Yan Tingting couldn't help but say anxiously, "Father, do you agree to go after Chu Xiu or not?" Yan Huainan patted Yan Tingting's head affectionately and said, "Kill him. Of course I'll kill him. Don't worry. I'll send someone to inform them to go after Chu Xiu in the south of the Yan River." Hearing Yan Huainan's words, Yan Tingting left, feeling satisfied. After Yan Tingting left, a warrior in his 30s walked out of nowhere and asked in confusion, "Master, are we really going to go after Chu Xiu in the south of the Yan River? But our Divine Force sect doesn't even know where Chu Xiu is." Yan Huainan turned around and snorted coldly. "Go after him, my foot. If you have the time, why don't you use it to cultivate? I said it to make Tingting happy, and you took it seriously? Spread the news and send some restless disciples down the mountain to take a stroll. Just put on a show." The disciple nodded in understanding. This was Yan Huainan's way of doing things. Although Yan Huainan had indeed doted on Yan Tingting all these years, he had never let her cause any big trouble. Yan Huainan had always put the interests of the Divine Force sect as the top priority. At this time in the outside world, as the Divine Force sect released the news, the people of Jianghu were shocked to discover that there were actually 4 of the major forces in the Jianghu that were listed in the Jianghu Song of the land of Northern Yan that were chasing after Chu Xiu. It was actually not a big deal to be chased by 4 great forces at the same time. After all, in the history of the Jianghu, there were some fierce and powerful demons who could even be hunted down by the whole Jianghu, but they were still alive and well. But the problem was, what was Chu Xiu's current strength? He was only in the inner invulnerability realm, and he was a member of the new generation in the Jianghu on the Longhu list. A few years ago, in Westchu Tong Kaitai, the rising star of the evil path, killed a direct descendant of the Zhang family of the celestial master mansion of Mount Longhu and ate it. His method was extremely bloody and cruel, and the celestial master mansion regarded it as a provocation. They even sent several experts in the oneness of heaven and men realm to hunt him down. Now, Chu Xiu's influence was even greater than Tong Kaitai's. Tong Kaitai had provoked 1, but Chu Xiu had provoked 4. At this time, in an inconspicuous little tavern in Mount Tai County, Lu Yu was holding a small wine pot. Many low-level Jianghu people came up to him one by one to report some things. He noted down those he felt were valuable and gave them some rewards. The information from the wind-sweeping tower did not come for nothing. For a nemophilia like Lu Yu, apart from specifically investigating one thing when he had a mission, most of the time he was passively collecting information. Especially for these low-level Jianghu people, an insignificant thing in their eyes could be a big news in the eyes of a nemophilia like Lu Yu. These low-level Jianghu people were the informants that Lu Yu kept. Although most of the information was useless, there were a lot of informants, and he could always get some valuable information from them. At this moment, Bai Qinhu walked into the tavern with the martial artists of the northern fluttering snow city with a gloomy face, heading straight for Lu Yu. Chapter 129. As a Jianghu news agent, the most important basic skill was to have good eyesight. It didn't matter if you were an expert or a fledgling Jianghu newcomer. As long as you had a bit of fame, as a Jianghu news agent, you would be able to recognize the other party. Lu Yu's heart skipped a beat when he saw Bai Qinhu. He seemed to know why Bai Qinhu was looking for him. Lu Yu quickly put down the wine pot and trotted over. "Nice to meet you, Lord 13. A cold light flashed in Bai Qinhu's eyes. "Do you know me?" Lu Yu quickly said. "Who doesn't know you, Lord 13? It's good that you know me. As an anemophilia, you should know why I'm looking for you. I heard that you had a deal with Chu Xiu. I want to know if Chu Xiu came to see you, what information you exchanged, and where he appeared in the end." Cold sweat immediately flowed down Lu Yu's forehead. He couldn't hide the deal between him and Chu Xiu from others. After all, there were so many martial artists watching when he met Chu Xiu. However, there were some things that he really could not say. It was not because he was afraid of Chu Xiu, but because the wind-sweeping brothel had its own rules. The Jianghu wind-sweeping brothel also had its own rules as a Jianghu wind-sweeping brothel. If he said it, his reputation would be ruined, and he would never be able to be a Jianghu wind-sweeping brothel again. Therefore, Lu Yu had to bite the bullet and said, "Lord 13, please don't make things difficult for me. You know the rules of wind-sweeping tower. I can't reveal the information of the client's deal." Bai Qinhu sneered. "You're just a little wind agent who spreads gossip. How dare you talk to me about rules? You're courting death. You know me. There are some things that I don't want to say twice. I'll ask you again. Are you going to tell me or not?" Lu Yu looked like he was about to cry. "Lord 13, if I tell you, I'll break the rules of the wind agent industry. It's not that I don't want to tell you, but I really can't." Bai Qinhu snorted and said, "You won't give up until you see the coffin." As he spoke, he unsheathed the long saber that seemed to be burning with raging flames. Sensing the scorching aura from the saber's edge, Lu Yu was so frightened that he closed his eyes. That was a 5th Revolution precious weapon, the Wings of Flame. It was said that Bai Qinhu had accidentally found it in an extinct volcano in the extreme north. It was made from a piece of strange metal that had fire patterns on it. It had its own firepower, and a scabbard made from cold iron was needed to prevent the firepower from leaking. Any kind of true qi that was poured into the Wings of Flame would become an extremely powerful fiery qi. With Lu Yu's strength, Bai Qinhu only needed one slash to turn him into ashes. The identity of an anemophilia was Lu Yu's rice bowl, but if he lost his life, he wouldn't even have the right to eat anymore. In the face of the true threat of death, Lu Yu could no longer hold on. He was just about to reveal all the information about Chu Xiu. However, at that moment, a hand landed on Bai Qinhu's flamewing saber. A gust of cold true energy suddenly erupted, completely freezing the flamewing saber. The scarlet color of the saber was dyed with a layer of ice blue. Bai Qinhu's expression changed, and he quickly retreated with the saber in hand. He looked at the person in front of him in horror and said, "Qi Yuanli, it's you." The person who attacked Bai Qinhu just now was dressed like a rich man, and he had a very lazy temperament. He was the vice leader of the wind-sweeping tower in the northern Yan, the three-eyed god Qi Yuanli. The martial artists of the wind-sweeping tower had a very low presence in the northern Yan. After all, they were just a wind organization, and they didn't make a name for themselves with martial arts. For example, Qi Yuanli had been leading the northern Yan for so many years, but he hadn't even fought once. But Qi Yuanli's attack just now made Bai Qinhu feel a great deal of pressure. The pure and powerful true Qi had even reached the point where it could easily suppress him. Qi Yuanli was probably only one step away from the third stage of the spirit condensation state. At that moment, Lu Yu was on the brink of death. He took a few deep breaths and bowed to Qi Yuanli. "Thank you for saving me, leader." Qi Yuanli shook his head helplessly and said, "How many times have I told you? Vice leader, don't always mix things up. But you did a good job. The wind-sweeping tower has its own rules, and anemophilia naturally has its own rules as well. You did nothing wrong." Qi Yuanli looked at Bai Qinhu and said faintly, 13th Lord, I heard what you said before. The wind-sweeping tower doesn't spread gossip, but the news of the Jianghu. The client took money to buy information from wind-sweeping tower, but in the end, we took advantage of the client's trust and sold his whereabouts. Wind-sweeping tower would never do something like that. The northern fluttering snow city is indeed powerful, but don't expect us to break our own rules and ruin our reputation. Bai Qinhu had wanted to use force before, and he didn't think that a small anemophilia was a big deal to him. But now, Qi Yuanli's strength really made Bai Qinhu unable to see through it. He snorted coldly and said, "The wind-sweeping tower should know what Chu Xiu has done. We must find him at the northern fluttering snow city. Just treat it as me spending money to buy information. Tell me about the transaction between you and Chu Xiu and the latest news about him." Qi Yuanli shook his head and said, "Any transaction between the wind-sweeping tower and the client will not be leaked. If you want to find Chu Xiu, you can pay. The wind-sweeping tower will send out a large number of agents to help you find Chu Xiu's whereabouts. You should know that we are absolutely professional in this area." Hearing Qi Yuanli say this, Bai Qinhu also felt a slight headache. You have ready-made information in your hands, but you refuse to sell it. You still want to send people to search blindly. Isn't this taking off your pants to fart? Qi Yuanli shook his head and said, "Rules are rules. No matter how troublesome it is, we have to act according to the rules." Bai Qinhu snorted coldly. With Qi Yuanli here, he probably wouldn't be able to get any information today. However, at this moment, he suddenly looked around at the low-level martial artists who came to report information to Lu Yu. Bai Qinhu directly took out a piece of purple gold and said, "Do you all know where this kid went with an assassin from the Blue Dragon Society recently? Whoever can provide the information will get this piece of purple gold." Looking at the purple gold, the eyes of the martial artists present immediately lit up. One of them immediately said, "Sir, I once saw Lu Yu follow an assassin from the Blue Dragon Society to a rundown array master in Daishan County. My house is nearby. I really saw it." "Oh, when was that?" Bai Qinhu immediately asked. "It was 3 months ago." Hearing this, Bai Qinhu immediately frowned. What was the use of 3 months ago? He wanted to know where Chu Xiu was now. What about recently? Didn't Chu Xiu come here? The martial artist said awkwardly, "I dare not lie to you, sir. I haven't been home recently, so I naturally don't know anything. However, Chu Xiu seems to have left something at Old Man Huang's place. Old Man Huang is a rundown array master. His cultivation has been crippled, so he can't set up any more arrays. He can barely even repair some low-level arrays. However, ever since Chu Xiu went there once, he seems to have money. He often buys all kinds of array repair materials in town. He is very generous. Previously, Old Man Huang would go to the tavern to eat, but now he pays people to deliver the materials to his house. He seems to be busy with something and doesn't even have time to go out to eat. Therefore, I suspect that Chu Xiu left something at Old Man Huang's place for him to repair. At the side, Lu Yu looked helpless. This wasn't what he wanted to say, but it was what others said. These informants were low-level people in the pugilistic world, who could get information as long as they were paid. They weren't people from Wind Sweeping Tower. Of course, it wasn't breaking the rules for them to say this. Furthermore, Lu Yu took a good look at this martial artist. He was very inconspicuous, but his observation skills were very good. He was very much in line with Wind Sweeping Tower's requirements. Bai Qinhu immediately pulled the martial artist over and said, "Bring me to Old Man Huang's place now. If there are any gains, don't worry. The purple gold is yours. You can even want cultivation techniques, status, or even join the drifting snow city in the extreme north." The martial artist's eyes lit up when he heard this. He immediately brought Bai Qinhu and the rest to Old Man Huang's place. At this moment, Old Man Huang was very satisfied. Chu Xiu was very generous. He had more than 10 taels of purple gold in his hands. Old Man Huang was a Khanate realm array master at his peak. Not to mention 10 taels of purple gold. He could set up some arrays for some small sects or small aristocratic families for at least 100 taels of purple gold. However, things were different now. It could be said that he didn't make a profit for 3 years, but when he did, he could eat for 3 years. At this moment, Bai Qinhu directly broke the door with his men. Old Man Huang was about to scold him, but he saw that the little tricks he set up at the door didn't even get close to Bai Qinhu. They were directly repelled by his protective aura. This made him immediately swallow back the words he was about to say. He was also a knowledgeable person. Although his cultivation was now crippled, he was sure that the expert in front of him was definitely an expert above the physical invulnerability realm. The martial artist who brought Bai Qinhu here said, "Old Man Huang, this is the 13th master of the drifting snow city in the extreme north. 13th master wants to ask you something. If you dare to hide anything, you know the consequences." Old Man Huang was shocked when he heard this. The drifting snow city in the extreme north was a colossus. Not to mention the current him, even when he was at his peak, he could only look up to it. This old man greets the 13th master. Bai Qinhu casually waved his hand and said coldly, "Blue Dragon Society's assassin blood demon, Chu Xiu has been here before? When was the last time you saw him?" Old Man Huang only hesitated for a moment before saying directly, "Yes, he has been here. I even saw him just 2 days ago." As he said this, Old Man Huang directly told Bai Qinhu all the news he had heard about Chu Xiu. He wasn't Lu Yu, who had to worry about the rules of the anemophilia and the wind-sweeping building. He was just a half-crippled array master. Facing a powerful existence like the drifting snow city in the extreme north, what else could he do other than to tell the truth? Chapter 130. The things that Old Man Huang told him made Bai Qinhu's eyes light up. He originally just wanted to determine the approximate location of Chu Xiu's last appearance, so that the floating snow city's martial artists could gather together and search for him. He never thought that they would find the place Chu Xiu wanted to go. Since this Chu Xiu had specially prepared a jade formation to resist the miasma, then he should be preparing to enter Chu from the forest between the northern Yan and west Chu. This way, as long as they intercepted him at the border of the northern Yan and west Chu in advance, it would be enough. Moreover, on Chu Xiu's side, Old Man Huang had slightly adjusted his face. Bai Qinhu immediately had Old Man Huang draw the face that he had adjusted for Chu Xiu. With this portrait, he sent people to the northern Yan and west Chu border as fast as possible to kill Chu Xiu. Chu Xiu had originally laid a smoke bomb at Old Man Huang's place just in case, but he never thought that the effect would be this good. The floating snow city directly set their sights on West Chu. When Chu Xiu escaped to the Wei County border, the floating snow city still had nothing at the West Chu border. In an inn on the West Chu border, Meng Yuanlong from the Righteous Manor came with some people and said with a frown, "Is there a problem with your information? Is Chu Xiu really planning to escape to West Chu?" They had been searching here for many days. In such a big place, it was normal that they couldn't find Chu Xiu, but they didn't even find a trace. Wasn't this Chu Xiu's hiding skill a bit too good? Bai Qinhu said with a gloomy face, "There's definitely no problem. I sent people to threaten Old Man Huang, and I personally used the Ice Soul Divine Eyes to test him. Old Man Huang didn't lie and he doesn't have the guts to lie." Meng Yuanlong said, "Then why haven't we found a trace of Chu Xiu until now?" Bai Qinhu was at a loss for words, but he still snorted coldly and said, "Who knows what means or secret arts Chu Xiu used?" Back then, Tong Kaitai, the Heart Hunter, provoked thousands of experts from Mount Longhu's celestial master abode to hunt him down, but didn't he escape in the end? Meng Yuanlong couldn't be bothered to talk nonsense with him. The two couldn't be compared at all. The West Chu side didn't have much, but it had the most undeveloped primitive forests. Normal martial artists would easily get lost if they entered, and they would even be injured by the miasma or poison. If a martial artist entered, not to mention over 1,000 people, even if there were over 10,000 people, they wouldn't be able to find him. But this was the northern Yen. Whether it was the main road or the small road, there were people everywhere. Unless Chu Xiu could become invisible, even if they couldn't find him, they would still be able to find some clues. At this time, a martial artist suddenly walked in and whispered in Meng Yuanlong's ear, "My lord, someone found traces of Chu Xiu at the border of the northern Yan and Wei County. And Chu Xiu did not disguise himself, he just simply covered his face." Bai Qinhu's eyes widened when he heard this. Meng Yuanlong turned to look at Bai Qinhu and sneered, "By sure sand you were played. That old man Huang didn't lie to you, but the one who lied to you was Chu Xiu. It was a trap from the beginning, but you didn't see it." Bai Qinhu's face turned green and white. Being able to find traces of old man Huang was purely a coincidence. The wind-sweeping buildings people were not willing to say anything about Chu Xiu. If it wasn't for someone accidentally seeing Chu Xiu go to old man Huang's place, he wouldn't have been able to find this place. It was because of this that Bai Qinhu never thought that Chu Xiu would set up a trap in this place and lead them to West Chu. In the end, he went to the Wei County and Eastern Qi, but he didn't want to lose face in front of Meng Yuanlong. Bai Qinhu gave a cold snort and said, "Don't talk about me, you aren't any better. When I said that Chu Xiu was coming to West Chu, didn't you also not react? You followed me here." Meng Yuanlong softly said, "I'm too lazy to talk nonsense with you. If we don't act now, Chu Xiu will really disappear without a trace." In fact, it was useless for Meng Yuanlong and Bai Qinhu to act now. Among the powers that were chasing after Chu Xiu, the Azure Dragon Society had too few members. The Gate of Divine Might was just putting on an act, and the Driftsnow City in the far north didn't have many powers in the East Yen region. Only the Mortuary Manor contributed the most. In the end, the Righteous Manor's people were led to the West Chu border. This allowed Chu Xiu to escape very easily this time. There was almost no resistance as he escaped from the northern Yen region and entered the Shangmang Mountain. Standing on the border between the northern Yen and Shangmang Mountain, Meng Yuanlong had a dark expression as he asked one of his subordinates, "Where are the traces of Chu Xiu?" That disciple carefully said, "The last traces of Chu Xiu were found on this border. It has already been 2 days, so Chu Xiu should have already escaped into the depths of the Shangmang Mountain." Seeing that Meng Yuanlong did not speak, that disciple cautiously asked, "Lord, should we still chase after him?" The Shangmang Mountain was so big. Even if they threw the entire Righteous Manor into the Shangmang Mountain, the chances of finding Chu Xiu would be extremely slim. Meng Yuanlong also felt conflicted. If they chased after him, the Shangmang Mountain was so big and filled with dense forests. If Chu Xiu randomly hid in a corner, how would they know where Chu Xiu was? It was almost a waste of effort. But if they did not chase after him, the outside world would definitely say that the Righteous Manor and the northern floating snow city were played by a small inner gang martial artist. Not to mention anything else, it would definitely be embarrassing. Moreover, since they had already given Chu Xiu time to escape, This period of time should be enough for Chu Xiu to refine the blood jade crystal dragon. Even if they found Chu Xiu, they would not be able to get the blood jade crystal dragon. At most, they could only kill Chu Xiu to vent their anger, which was not very meaningful to them. However, at this moment, a voice suddenly rang out. Two northern yen sects working together. And now you can't even find one person? You actually want to give up halfway? What a joke. Heavenly Sin branch leader walked over from afar with his hands clasped behind his back. Because he was wearing a mask, no one could see his expression clearly. But everyone could hear the sarcasm in his tone. Bai Qinhu's eyes flashed with anger. Heavenly Sin branch leader, you still dare to show up? If it wasn't for you, there would not be so many *T incidents. Heavenly Sin branch leader said indifferently. Treasures belong to those who have the ability to obtain them. You allowed your northern fluttering snow city to take it, but not me? Forget it. I'm not here to quarrel with you today. A treasure like the blood jade crystal dragon, you and I can fight for it, but not that traitor Chu Xiu. You don't want to find Chu Xiu, but I won't give up. Bai Qinhu sneered. By the time you find him, the blood jade crystal dragon will have already been refined. Moreover, Shangmeng Mountain is so big, you won't be able to find him. Heavenly Sin branch leader took out a box and said, This box contains Chu Xiu's hair. I collected it from Chu Xiu's previous residence. I gave it to the Wind-Sweeping Pavilion's divination masters, and asked them to use it as a medium to calculate Chu Xiu's approximate location. Although it won't be very accurate, at least it will give us a direction. It won't be easy to completely refine a treasure like the blood jade crystal dragon. Even you and I will need a month to refine it. Chu Xiu will probably need 2 months or even more. As long as we can find Chu Xiu's location within 2 months, even if we can't catch him, we can force him out and not let him have time to refine the blood jade crystal dragon. If you agree, then the 3 of us can temporarily cooperate and pay to look for divination masters at Wind-Sweeping Pavilion. After all, the price of a divination master is more expensive than hiring a formation master. Bai Qinhu thought for a moment and snorted coldly. I'll pay, but you guys go. I'll wait here for news. The northern fluttering snow city didn't have a good relationship with Wind-Sweeping Pavilion. Previously, Qi Yuanli even tried to stop him, causing him to lose face. Bai Qinhu didn't want to have any dealings with Wind-Sweeping Pavilion anymore. Beside him, Meng Yuanlong also nodded in agreement. Just as the 3 parties were preparing to work together to hunt down Chu Xiu, Chu Xiu had already escaped into the depths of Shangmeng Mountain. He found a random cave and hid there. This time Chu Xiu escaped very easily. It was even easier than when he was wanted by Nie Donglu and the others in the Linzhong Commandery. Not only was it because Chu Xiu led the Fluttering Snow City and the morale-gathering village to the West Chu border, but it was also because there weren't many small sects that came to hunt him down. Or it could be said that those small sects and families didn't dare to participate in this kind of thing. Last time, when Chu Xiu was being hunted down, he was just a Xiantian warrior. He was unknown, or it could be said that he was only a little famous among the younger generation. That was why those small sects and families dared to follow the orders of the morale-gathering village to hunt him down. But now Chu Xiu had stepped into the inner aura realm, and was ranked 18th on the Longhu leaderboard. He even slaughtered the Yu clan alone, and led the assassins of the Blue Dragon Society to exterminate the Yao clan in front of the people of Jianghu. He showed his powerful achievements and ruthless methods that could kill a physical aura warrior. Facing such an existence, those small sects and families didn't dare to hunt down Chu Xiu even if they received orders from the morale-gathering village. That was simply courting death. In the east of Yan Dynasty, a force with a physical aura warrior was already considered as a powerful sect or family. But even with their strength, they didn't dare to provoke Chu Xiu. So even though those demons who provoked the wrath of Jiang who looked like people wanted to kill them, in fact there were many people who shouted slogans. Those who actually dared to take action were as rare as phoenix feathers and Qilin horns. Of course, the current Chu Xiu hadn't reached the level of those great demons. But his power was enough to scare off most of the people who tried to gain personal gains. In the cave, Chu Xiu wasn't in a hurry to refine the blood jade exquisite treasure. This kind of treasure needed a certain amount of time to refine. So he decided to first take a look at the Buddhist martial arts in the skill transmission jade slip. Chapter 131. The light yellow jade slip was like amber. Chu Xiu held the jade slip and probed it with his mental strength. A large amount of information surged into his mind, causing Chu Xiu to let out a muffled groan. Fortunately, Chu Xiu did not immediately use the cultivation transmission jade slip when he received it. The information in the cultivation transmission jade slip was truly astonishing. The amount of information was more than 10 times more than the 3 blades of Avicii. One could imagine how complicated this cultivation technique was. After a while, Chu Xiu finally looked through the contents of the technique in detail. However, his expression was a little strange. Old man Huang was right. The technique in the jade slip was indeed a Buddhist technique. More accurately, it was a technique of the Tantric sect, a branch of Buddhism. Fast and slow 9 words formula. Buddhism had been passed down since ancient times. There were countless branches, and the most powerful was naturally the Zen sect. The Subodhi monastery had always cultivated the Zen sect techniques. The Dharma and martial arts of the Great Light Temple were mainly based on the Zen sect, but there were also some tantric techniques mixed in. And now, the fast and slow 9 words formula that Chu Xiu had obtained was the most authentic tantric technique. The fast and slow 9 words formula cultivated the mental strength internally, and the physical body externally. It advocated the eternal instant of the unity of heaven and man. Its tyrannical power was different from the martial arts of the Central Plains. As the name suggested, the 9 words formula was divided into 9 words. They were Lin Bing Doja Array Front. Although the 9 words formula was called fast or slow, it actually had 9 different kinds of strange and bizarre changes. It could only be fully unleashed with a strong inner force. Without rest, it could unleash the powerful seal art of the Tantric Buddhism sect to its peak. The 9 words formula's seal evolution were Lin Aduga seal, focused on stability, impregnable. Binged Great Vajrawal seal, main force indestructible. Dobe External Lion seal, main force clang of thunder. Ja Inner Lion seal, main force invincible. All External Binding seal, main force, seek luck and avoid calamity. Array Inner Binding seal, main force, let me move freely. Laya Wisdom Fist seal, main force heaven and earth are useless. In the Sun Will seal, it mainly controlled the 5 elements and restrained the baleful aura. First, the Perfect Aquarius seal. The main light was to repel evil. After carefully reading through the 9 words formula, Chu Xiu heaved a sigh of relief. He finally understood why there was so much information in this technique imparting jade slip. Each of the fast and slow 9 words formulas could be used as an individual cultivation technique. With the 9 words combined into one, the amount of information was naturally immense. Moreover, this fast and slow 9 words formula could be said to be a rather perfect martial art. Within the 9 words formula, there were internal and external, offensive and defensive, mental pressure, and sensory changes. It could be said that just this cultivation technique alone could push Chu Xiu's close combat cultivation to a whole new level. Chu Xiu had not wasted so much effort to destroy the Zhang family, snatch the technique imparting jade slip, and find someone to repair it. This cultivation technique did not appear in the original plot. It was probably because Chu Xiu had not interfered in his previous life. The Zhang family of Linzhong Commandery and the Zhang family of Mount Tai Commandery did not merge smoothly. Perhaps they perished together, or outsiders intervened. In any case, this fast and slow 9 words formula jade slip had not been repaired by anyone. From the current Chu Xiu's perspective, this fast and slow 9 words formula's level was definitely not low. At the very least, it had to be between the 7th and 8th transformations. Its cultivation requirements were also very harsh. The fast and slow 9 words formula focused on internal and external cultivation. It was also very demanding on one's own body. Without enough inner energy, it was impossible to activate the seals. With Chu Xiu's current cultivation of the inner aura realm, he could barely reach the standard of cultivating this fast and slow 9 words formula. If Chu Xiu had obtained this cultivation technique when he was still at the innate realm, he could only stare at it helplessly. He would not be able to cultivate it. If he were to forcefully cultivate it, he would probably go berserk. Putting down the fast and slow 9 words formula, Chu Xiu prepared to first refine the blood jade exquisite. The blood jade exquisite contained the essence of qi and blood of tens of thousands of warriors collected by the Blood River sect. It was extremely powerful. Not only could it transform one's gang qi into the powerful and evil blood refined god's gang qi, it could also strengthen one's qi and blood, raising the strength of one's physical body to a whole new level. And for an inner aura realm warrior like Chu Xiu, the power of the blood jade exquisite could also push his realm to another level, allowing Chu Xiu to reach the physical invulnerability realm. From the inner aura realm to the physical invulnerability realm, the power of the blood jade exquisite could also push his realm to another level, allowing Chu Xiu to reach the physical invulnerability realm. In the past, Chu Xiu only dripped water into the bucket 1 drop at a time. But now, as long as he could refine the blood jade exquisite, it was equivalent to holding a bigger bucket and pouring water into it. Chu Xiu was almost 100% sure that he could use the power of the blood jade exquisite to step into the physical invulnerability realm. Holding the blood jade exquisite, Chu Xiu's inner force entered it. In an instant, a turbulent qi and blood surged into Chu Xiu's body. In an instant, Chu Xiu's face became extremely red. Even his whole body was surging with qi and blood, and his body seemed to have expanded by 1 size. Ordinary people would definitely need to take steps to refine the blood jade exquisite. Doing it like Chu Xiu was purely courting death. But Chu Xiu naturally had the confidence to do so, because he had the glazed gold thread goo in his body. The moment the blood jade exquisite's powerful qi and blood entered Chu Xiu's body, the glazed gold thread goo sensed this power. It immediately released countless golden threads, and swallowed the powerful qi and blood into its body. Then, it transformed it into its own gentle power, and returned it to Chu Xiu. The Heaven Sim branch leader thought that Chu Xiu would need 2 months or more to refine the blood jade exquisite. But in fact, Chu Xiu used even less time than them. The Heaven Sim branch leader and the others needed a month to refine the blood jade exquisite. But now, for Chu Xiu, half a month was enough. Half a month later, the blood jade exquisite's power was completely refined, and the blood jade exquisite in his hand also turned into powder. A powerful force rushed into Chu Xiu's dantian and meridians. At this moment, the power in Chu Xiu's body suddenly erupted, like a flood that was stopped by a dam. It suddenly burst out, and the extremely sharp aura even caused the cave that Chu Xiu was in to tremble. Chu Xiu used his palm as a knife, and chopped out with a loud bang. The scarlet aura that shone with endless blood fiendish and cold aura fell down. It was more than 7 feet long and directly cut into the surrounding stone walls. In an instant, a huge cut appeared, as if it was cutting tofu. Physical invulnerability realm completed. At this moment, Chu Xiu had stepped into the physical invulnerability realm. If other martial artists of the same level were to see this, their jaws would definitely drop. The difference between the internal and external invulnerability realms was the greatest for martial artists of the same level. This was especially true for the physical invulnerability realm. Some people could only release their aura a few inches, and they couldn't even release it out of their body. But some martial artists could release their aura a few feet out, and it was normal for them to release their aura. However, those who could release their aura a few feet out were martial artists who had reached the peak of the physical invulnerability realm. Their own accumulation was already extremely deep, and when they had just entered the physical invulnerability realm, most martial artists' aura was actually measured in inches. To be able to reach 1 foot was already considered extremely talented. Chu Xiu had just broken through to the physical invulnerability realm, and his aura could already reach 7 feet. From this point, it could be seen how deep and abnormal Chu Xiu's accumulation was. Most importantly, Chu Xiu's current aura had his own powerful attribute, the blood-refined divine aura. There were also different types of aura. Most martial artists only used ordinary aura, which evolved from their own inner strength, and didn't carry any other power. Higher-grade aura could carry the changes of one's own martial arts method. The aura would carry the same kind of power according to the attribute of the martial arts method you cultivated. And the true extreme aura was the evolution of one's own martial arts method and martial arts' true meaning. For example, The pure yang aura of the Chunyang Dao sect of the Three Clear Taoist sect was known as the punisher of evil and suppressing demons. It could strangle all evil beings in the world. There was also the White Tiger killing divine aura of the White Tiger Hall of the Four Divine Abilities. It contained the power of the Western White Tiger Eugene, and it was also infused with killing intent and evil aura. It was incomparably sharp and had an evil aura. This level of aura contained martial arts' true meaning, and was a famous existence in the underworld. And the blood-refined divine aura that Chu Xiu cultivated now was also an existence of the same level as the pure yang aura, or the White Tiger killing divine aura. It was also famous in ancient times. However, following the demise of the Blood River sect, the martial arts methods of the Blood River sect were no longer complete. Naturally, the cultivation method of the blood-refined divine aura was also lost. Now that Chu Xiu had cultivated the blood-refined divine aura with the help of the blood jade crystal, he could be said to be a unique existence in the underworld. Unless someone could obtain another blood jade crystal. However, a treasure like the blood jade crystal was also a treasure of the same level in the Blood River sect in the past. The appearance of one was already considered a stroke of luck. The chances of another appearing could be said to be very low. After stepping into the physical invulnerability stage, Chu Xiu wasn't in a hurry to come out. He cultivated in the cave for another half a month to stabilize his realm. At the same time, he practiced the fast and slow 9 words formula again before walking out of the cave. However, on the second day after Chu Xiu left the cave, he felt that something was wrong. Someone was searching the mountain. The dense forest of Shangmeng Mountain was so big. Although there were caravans coming and going, they took a fixed path. However, the traces left behind on Shangmeng Mountain indicated that someone was searching the mountain along a fixed path. Moreover, the person who came was very strong. Chu Xiu couldn't be sure if these people were looking for him. However, since he had left the cave, he had left behind a trace. In this barren mountain where there were no traces all year round, even the slightest trace was very obvious. Even if he went back to cover up the trace now, it would be too late. A cold light flashed in Chu Xiu's eyes. He didn't escape along the other side of the trace. Instead, he followed the trace. He wanted to see who exactly was searching the mountain. After nightfall, Chu Xiu followed the trace and jumped between the branches of the dense forest. Finally, he caught up with the people in front of him. There were 5 people in front of him. 1 physical invulnerability stage, 1 inner invulnerability stage, and 3 inborn stage. Seeing these 3 people, Chu Xiu's eyes turned cold. Needless to say, these 5 people were from the drifting snow city of the far north. Chapter 132. Previously, Chu Xiu did not expect that the northern floating snow city and the Morgue village would send people to hunt him down. Shangmeng Mountain was so huge, and the people from these 2 sects would not even make a splash. How could they find him? It would just be a waste of effort. However, looking at it now, the other party seemed to have locked on to his approximate location, and were searching for him in a certain area. Moreover, the arrangement of these 5 people was also planned by them. Chu Xiu had the ability to kill a physical invulnerability realm martial artist. Therefore, among the 5 people, there must be at least 1 physical invulnerability realm martial artist. Otherwise, they would be killed by Chu Xiu in a second. And an inner invulnerability realm martial artist played a supporting role. Even if Chu Xiu could kill a physical invulnerability realm martial artist, an inner invulnerability realm martial artist also had the ability to injure Chu Xiu. As for the 3 inborn realm martial artists, their role was to expand the search area. If they encountered an existence like Chu Xiu, it was basically a dead end. Chu Xiu retracted his aura and observed, but at this moment, he suddenly heard an abnormally soft sound of something piercing through the air. Chu Xiu's figure moved, and he directly jumped to the ground. The tree he was hiding in had been directly smashed to pieces by a short spear infused with astral energy. This explosion was extremely loud in the night sky. The 5 people who were being followed by Chu Xiu were instantly shocked. They immediately turned around and saw Chu Xiu on the ground. The 5 people were all stunned. They were still looking for Chu Xiu. They did not expect that he had been following them all this time. Thinking of Chu Xiu's terrifying strength, among the 5 people, except for the physical invulnerability realm martial artist, the other 4 felt a lingering fear. With Chu Xiu's strength, if he wanted to launch a sneak attack, none of them would be able to survive. Behind them, a physical invulnerability realm martial artist strode over and sneered. You people from the drifting snow city of the far north are really trash. You didn't even notice after being followed for so long. The physical invulnerability realm martial artist who ambushed Chu Xiu from behind was from the Morgue village. He was dressed very strangely. He wore a black rattan armor, and carried 4 short spears on his back. He also carried a black long spear in his hand. Moreover, from the looks of it, he was also very proficient in Qinggong. At the very least, before he made his move, Chu Xiu did not notice him. This martial artist from the Morgue Manor had been following Chu Xiu's trail, but he was afraid of alerting the enemy, so he did not bring anyone else. He only relied on his Qinggong to chase after Chu Xiu, looking for opportunities to attack Chu Xiu. It was a pity that Chu Xiu's reaction was too amazing. His trump card, the handgun, was actually dodged just like that. The martial artist from the drifting snow city of the far north snorted coldly. Don't make sarcastic remarks. Once we catch him, we will split the credit equally. As soon as he finished speaking, the physical invulnerability realm martial artist from the far north directly rushed towards Chu Xiu. Although Chu Xiu had a record of killing a physical invulnerability realm martial artist, that battle was also very dangerous. It could be said that he had barely won. Although they were all in the physical invulnerability realm, their strength was slightly weaker than Zen Master Heng Shan, who had been killed by Chu Xiu in the past. However, the difference was not too great. With 2 against 1, how could they not be able to kill Chu Xiu? With such a mentality, the drifting snow city of the far north's palm fell. An icy blue Gangqi with a dense chill exploded along with the palm force. He actually held back 20% of his strength. The Heavenly Sim branch leader had said that it did not matter if Chu Xiu was dead or alive. But for the Morgue Manor and the drifting snow city of the far north, it was best to capture him alive. If they could capture him alive, they could even pry out many good things from his mouth. However, the next moment, the drifting snow city martial artist knew that he was wrong. He was gravely mistaken. Facing this palm, Chu Xiu's hands formed a very strange seal. His hands were like wheels, and he poured his inner force into them. A resplendent golden light suddenly burst forth. Army formula, Great Vajra Wheel Seal. The main force of the Great Vajra Wheel Seal was condensed like an all, indestructible. As this seal descended, it was as if the guardian deity had subdued all demons and suppressed the heavens. Boundless explosive power was hidden within this seal. And as soon as this seal appeared, the eyes of the martial artist from the Driftsnow city of the far north flashed with endless terror. He wanted to retreat, but it was already too late. With a loud bang, his entire arm was smashed into minced meat by Chu Xiu's Great Vajra Wheel Seal. Moreover, the seal did not stop at all. It directly blasted a huge hole in his opponent's chest. As a mist of blood scattered, the drifting snow city martial artist's body was like a rag doll, directly flying back more than 30 meters. Instant kill. Although the drifting snow city martial artist had not expected Chu Xiu's strength and wanted to capture him alive, he had held back 20% of his strength. But the result was that he had been instantly killed by Chu Xiu. This also showed how great Chu Xiu's current strength was, and how tyrannical the 9 words formula of fast and slow was. The drifting snow city martial artist, who was about to rush up from behind, was already stunned. The intelligence clearly stated that Chu Xiu was at the inner invulnerability realm. How did he become a physical invulnerability expert in less than a month? And how was his strength so terrifying? Although he was very puzzled, it was clearly not the time for him to be puzzled. The physical invulnerability realm martial artist relied on his outstanding Qinggong to directly turn around and flee. Chu Xiu's expression did not change. He used the formation formula and formed the inner binding seal with both hands. In an instant, Chu Xiu's entire body's genuine qi was channeled into his legs under the guidance of the inner binding seal. With a move of his feet, his figure instantly appeared in front of the drifting snow city martial artist, as swift as thunder, and as fast as lightning. This was the inner binding seal. As long as the seal was not broken, one could explode with extreme speed and move unhindered between heaven and earth. Perhaps the only shortcoming of this seal was that the explosive speed was too fast, causing the internal energy to be consumed like flowing water. It could only be used in short-range battles, but it was impossible to use it for long-range raids. The drifting Snow City martial artist was startled by the sudden appearance of Chu Xiu. Although his qigong was not very brilliant, it was enough to show off among the martial artists of the same level. But now he was instantly caught up by Chu Xiu. However, the information on Chu Xiu did not show that he knew qigong. If he did not know that the drifting Snow City would not harm him, he would have thought that Meng Yuanlong had given them fake information to send them to their deaths. The realm and strength that Chu Xiu had displayed simply didn't match up with the information he had received. A trace of cold killing intent flashed in Chu Xiu's eyes. The red sleeve saber in his hand suddenly slashed out. In the night, the cold and evil blood refined divine shield flashed with scarlet light, looking even more strange. The drifting Snow City martial artist gritted his teeth. His gang qi erupted from his body and he swung the long spear in his hand. In an instant, dozens of spear radiance burst out and blocked in front of him. However, under the blood-refined divine shield, not only his gang qi, but even the fourth revolution precious spear in his hand was directly cut off by Chu Xiu's saber. When the blood-refined divine shield entered his body, the cold-killing intent and blood qi immediately caused the drifting Snow City martial artist to spit out a mouthful of blood. Before he could react, he was greeted by the violent saber momentum that was like a continuous drizzle. Dusk drizzle, soul-beckoning red sleeve. Under the bombardment of the overwhelming saber momentum and the blood-refined divine shield, the drifting Snow City martial artist from the drifting Snow City only lasted for more than 10 moves before his soul was cut off, and his body was separated from his body. Chu Xiu looked in the direction where the other martial artists had fled, and a cold light flashed in his eyes. The power of the internal binding seal burst out, and he directly caught up with the Xiantian realm martial artist at the fastest speed. He used the great art of extinguishing heaven and earth, extinguishing soul shifting to force out some information. When he learned that the three sects had jointly spent a lot of money to hire the divination masters of the wind-sweeping building to deduce his approximate location, Chu Xiu also felt a little helpless. This method was simply impossible to guard against. Of course, it was easy to defend against it. When one's strength reached a certain level, those divination masters would not dare to easily deduce the information about one's location. Otherwise, before the information was divined, the backlash of the heavenly secrets would seriously injure them or even kill them. Therefore, whether it was the amateur divination masters of the wind-sweeping building, or the experts of the Tao of Tao who were proficient in the heavenly secrets calculation Tao, they would not easily deduce someone. They would only deduce something. This time, the three sects had jointly spent a lot of money to hire the divination masters of the wind-sweeping building. Obviously, they were prepared to take back the blood jade exquisite jade before Chu Xiu refined it. This way their money would not be wasted. However, this time, they were obviously going to suffer a loss. This was because Chu Xiu had already refined the blood jade exquisite jade. Even if they found Chu Xiu, it would be useless. Those martial artists who fled were not too stupid. They still knew to split up. After Chu Xiu caught up with one, the others also ran far away. Chu Xiu rubbed his chin. This time, his traces were completely exposed. The distance was too close. No matter how he hid, the other party would follow his traces and chase after him. In fact, there was no difference between staying in Shangmeng Mountain and going out. Moreover, if the other party really surrounded him, that would be the real danger. With Chu Xiu's current strength, facing a great expert who was at the unity of heaven and man realm was purely courting death. Therefore, he had to find the fastest way to break out of this situation. After thinking for a while, Chu Xiu suddenly remembered that he still had some karma in Wei County. Since the water was already so muddy, he might as well make it even muddier. Thinking of this, Chu Xiu did not delay. He directly ran down the mountain. The place he was headed to was Tongzhou Prefecture in Wei County. Early in the morning, Bai Qinhu and Meng Yuanlong brought some disciples with them. When they saw the corpses on the ground, their faces turned gloomy. The few people who had survived last night told them the news. This shocked Bai Qinhu and Meng Yuanlong. The others did not know how Chu Xiu stepped into the physical invulnerability realm. However, from the description, they could guess that Chu Xiu must have refined the blood jade exquisite dragon. That was how he stepped into the physical invulnerability realm. Moreover, he could use the blood-refined God Gang. However, they could not imagine how Chu Xiu was able to refine the blood jade exquisite dragon in less than a month. If it were them, they would not be able to do it. There was also the corpse of the martial artist from the northern floating snow city. He was killed in one move by someone using an extremely fierce and violent fist technique. Chu Xiu did not reveal that he knew such martial arts in the past. If not for their subordinates swearing that the person who killed the martial artist was Chu Xiu, they would even suspect that there was an outsider helping Chu Xiu. Chapter 133. Chu Xiu's actions had completely ruined Bai Qinhu and Meng Yuanlong's plans. It could be said that they had suffered a huge loss this time. Not only did they spend a large sum of money to hire a divination master from the wind-sweeping pavilion, but they also spent so much manpower and resources to come to the Shangmang mountain to kill Chu Xiu. Wasn't it all for the blood jade chestnut? But now Chu Xiu actually told them that he had refined the blood jade crystal. This made Bai Qinhu and Meng Yuanlong somewhat unable to accept it. Although they were angry that Chu Xiu dared to snatch food from the tiger's mouth, they were not as angry as the Heavenly Sin branch leader, who had been schemed against by Chu Xiu and was determined to kill him. Their target had always been the blood jade. But now, the blood jade crystal was gone. Even if they killed Chu Xiu, what was the point? Meng Yuanlong's expression was gloomy. Are we still chasing? Now that he clearly knew that the blood jade crystal was gone, there didn't seem to be much meaning in continuing the pursuit besides killing Chu Xiu to vent his anger. Bai Qinhu gritted his teeth. After paying such a huge price, we have already found his tracks. Why aren't we chasing after him? The blood jade crystal is gone, but Chu Xiu has a lot of techniques on him. Let's squeeze as many out of him as we can. Anyway, we can't come here for nothing. Meng Yuanlong nodded. He was thinking the same. At the very least, they had to bring back something to the Morgue village. Right, do we need to tell the people from the Blue Dragon Society? Bai Qinhu coldly snorted. No need to tell them. The Blue Dragon Society only has a few hundred assassins. Their numbers are limited. Let them look for him themselves. Moreover, Heavenly Sin Division leader is a bit narrow-minded. His main goal is to vent his anger and take revenge. We are going to capture him alive and interrogate him for his techniques. If Heavenly Sin Division leader kills Chu Xiu in a single move, we will have suffered a huge loss. Meng Yuanlong didn't care. But after hearing Bai Qinhu's words, the two ordered the others to gather and follow the traces left by Chu Xiu. Compared to the angry Bai Qinhu and Meng Yuanlong, Chu Xiu was leisurely strolling on the streets of the Tongzhou prefecture. After not returning to the Tongzhou prefecture for more than a year, the Tongzhou prefecture had changed. Of the three great families in the Tong State prefecture, the Li family had been exterminated by Chu Xiu. The Shun family and the Chu family had been exterminated in a single night. It could be said that the few great powers in the Tong State prefecture had been wiped out in an instant. However, the Tongzhou prefecture was close to the Yan kingdom, and could be considered a large prefecture in Wei County. No one would want to see the Tongzhou prefecture decline, so the current Tongzhou prefecture was like a three-legged tripod. One of them was the Zhou clan, which migrated from another prefecture, and had a Xiantian realm martial artist. There was also the Green Wolf gang, which had two Xiantian experts. The three of them were originally bandits in Shangmang Mountain. In the end, Shangmang Mountain was controlled by Han Bao and the other bandits could no longer survive. The three from the Green Wolf gang took the opportunity to take control of the Tongzhou prefecture, and became the strongest force there. The last one was the Shun clan. Shun Mo might be dead, but the Shun clan was still around. But without the Xiantian realm martial artist, the Shun clan became the weakest faction in the Tongzhou prefecture. When Shun Mo was around, Shun Bai would still take care of the Shun clan. Now that Shun Mo was dead, the Shun clan had nothing to do with Shun Bai. Shun Bai was a person with a truly cold heart. To the Shun clan that raised him, he didn't have the slightest bit of affection. In his opinion, the clansmen of the Shun clan, except for his younger brother, were all a bunch of trash. It was better for them to die earlier. If they died earlier, his younger brother would be able to follow him into the Azure Water Sword sect to cultivate without any worries. Now that his younger brother was dead, the Shun clan didn't matter to him anymore. As long as they didn't bother him, the Shun clan could go wherever they wanted. In the beginning, the other factions in the Tongzhou prefecture would still be apprehensive of Shunbai and didn't dare to offend the Shun clan. But after knowing Shunbai's attitude, they didn't have the slightest bit of apprehension towards the Shun clan. All kinds of bullying and suppression, but Shunbai didn't even ask. The other factions were finally relieved, while the Shun clan was in complete despair. Chu Xiu aimlessly walked on the streets. This time, he was here to make his presence known. It would be best if he could stir up some trouble. It was just that when Chu Xiu didn't want to stir up trouble, some trouble would line up. But when he wanted to stir up trouble, there would be no trouble. Chu Xiu walked to the Chu clan's restaurant. This restaurant was also managed by Chu Xiu back then, and he even stayed here for a period of time. Seeing Chu Xiu walk in, the restaurant's shopkeeper subconsciously raised his head and was immediately shocked. He quickly walked over and said, "Second young master? You're back?" The restaurant's shopkeeper was just an ordinary person. He was in charge of managing the restaurant, but he didn't know about the major events that happened in the martial world. He naturally knew about the extermination of the Chu clan. He only vaguely heard that Chu Xiu didn't die, but he didn't know that Chu Xiu was once wanted by the Azure Water Sword sect. "Second young master, you're back to rebuild the Chu clan?" The shopkeeper actually had a trace of expectation on his face. Chu Xiu shook his head and said, "The Chu clan is already gone. What's the point of rebuilding? Old Fong, arrange a seat for me. You should know my taste." After shopkeeper Fong arranged a seat for Chu Xiu then asked, "Which clan is managing this restaurant now?" Shopkeeper Fong bitterly pointed to himself and said, "I'm managing it myself. It doesn't belong to that clan." Chu Xiu laughed and said, "Oh, that's not bad." Shopkeeper Fong put on a long face and said, "But this lowly one would rather go back to the Chu clan and be a shopkeeper." Back when the Chu clan was in trouble, the Shun clan took over the restaurant. But then for some unknown reason, the Shun clan actually left, and the Green Wolf gang came. The Green Wolf gang didn't occupy my restaurant, but they had a request. They wanted me to fork out a large sum of money, and this restaurant would be considered my people. I gritted my teeth and took the money. After all, the Chu clan was gone, and this lowly one had to think about his future. But who would have thought that after taking the money, the Green Wolf gang would use the excuse of collecting protection fees to take a large sum of money from this lowly one every month. Originally, taking the money was fine. I just treated it as spending money to buy peace. Every month, this lowly one would pay the money on time. In the end, the Green Wolf gang would come every few days to eat and drink for free. They even wanted to book the entire restaurant, scaring away many customers. They would come every few days and seriously affect the restaurant's business. In the past few months, I've been working at a loss. This treatment really can't compare to when this lowly one was still in the Chu clan. The restaurant's shopkeeper complained when he saw Chu Xiu. If this continued, he would lose his job as the restaurant's shopkeeper. At worst, he would just have to find another place to make a living. At this time, a rough-looking Xiantian martial artist led a large group of noisy martial artists into the restaurant. Before they even saw anyone, the leading martial artist shouted, "Where are they? Old Fong, clear the second floor for me. Prepare all the good food and drinks for me. Same old rules." The shopkeeper had a helpless look on his face. "They're here again. Second young master. Why don't you go downstairs first? I'll prepare a seat for you." This shopkeeper wasn't a member of the pugilistic world, so he didn't know the difference in strength between martial artists. However, he seemed to have heard that the two leaders of the Green Wolf gang were on the same level as the Chu clan's previous patriarch. Second young master definitely wouldn't be able to defeat them. A strange look flashed in Chu Xiu's eyes. He waved his hand casually. The shopkeeper wanted to say something, but the Green Wolf gang martial artist walked over with a frown. "Old Fong, What are you still doing here? Didn't you hear me clearly when I told you to clear the place? As he spoke, the Green Wolf Gang martial artist glanced at Chu Xiu and shouted coldly, "Get lost!" Chu Xiu glanced at him and said indifferently, "You're really used to being a bandit. Now that you've come ashore and washed your hands clean, you're still so arrogant. You're the kind of person who doesn't know your place." No wonder even two Xiantian martial artists were chased out of Shangmeng Mountain by Han Bao. With this kind of behavior, it's no wonder you can't fight Han Bao enough. Chu Xiu's words immediately made the Green Wolf Gang martial artist's face turn black. Being a bandit wasn't a good birth unless one reached the level of the 36 great bandits of the northern lands. Hence, he hated it when people mentioned the word bandit in front of him. Moreover, being chased out of Shangmeng Mountain by Han Bao was their reverse scale. It was the most humiliating moment of their lives. Now that he heard Chu Xiu mention this matter, the Green Wolf Gang martial artist immediately pointed at Chu Xiu and shouted, "Little brat, I think you're living a..." However, before he could finish his sentence, Chu Xiu's hand moved and directly pressed the martial artist's head onto the table with the great sacrificial grappling hand. A chopstick suddenly appeared in Chu Xiu's right hand and suddenly stabbed into the martial artist's temple. With a soft pu sound, the martial artist was directly nailed to the table. This horrifying scene immediately scared the people present into silence. Chu Xiu stood up slowly and said indifferently, "How troublesome. I can't even eat in peace." With that, Chu Xiu directly walked down the stairs. When the other Green Wolf Gang martial artists saw Chu Xiu walking over, some of them were so frightened that they directly knelt on the ground and trembled. It wasn't that they were too timid, but the scene in front of them was simply shocking to them. In the eyes of these ordinary gang members, their Xiantian realm sect leader was already considered an expert. In the end, he was killed like a chicken. No, it was even easier than killing a chicken. Just like that, the head of the Green Wolf Gang's sect leader was nailed to the table with a chopstick. Looking at the twitching corpse of the Green Wolf Gang's sect leader, it was already good enough that they didn't wet their pants. When Chu Xiu completely left and disappeared from the long street, the entire restaurant seemed to be in an uproar. They began to frantically discuss who that person was, and why he had such strong strength. Chapter 134. The Tongzhou Prefecture was only so big. Usually, even a small matter would be known within a day, let alone the news of a Xiantian martial artist from the Green Wolf Gang being killed. Shopkeeper Feng didn't realize the sensitivity of Chu Xiu's identity, and directly revealed Chu Xiu's identity, which caused another commotion. Ordinary people might not know of Chu Xiu's identity, but how could they not know? After all, when the Azure Water Sword sect issued an arrest warrant for Chu Xiu in Wei County, it caused a huge commotion. Almost all the martial artists in the Tongzhou Prefecture knew of it. Within the Shen clan, a few of the Shen clan's elders had a delighted expression when they heard the news. It wasn't because they found Shen Mo's murderer, but because they could use this news to curry favor with Shen Bai. Ever since Shen Mo's death, their Shen clan no longer had any relations with Shen Bai. Naturally, they no longer had the protection of the Azure Water Sword sect. Unless they produced a Xiantian realm martial artist, the Shen clan would completely decline. To the other major sects, Xiantian martial artists were considered normal. There were even some disciples who could reach the Xiantian realm in their teens. But to a small clan like the Shen clan, a Xiantian martial artist was the strongest force that could suppress the clan. Without a Xiantian martial artist, they could only endure being oppressed. After a few of the Shen clan's elders finished discussing, they immediately decided to send someone to inform Shen Bai at the Azure Water Sword sect. They had to be the first to deliver the news. The Azure Water Sword sect was called the Azure Water Sword sect because there was a long river below the Azure Water Sword sect, named Azure Water River. It was said that this Zhonglan River was created when two ancient martial artists fought. One of them used a sword to slash out a river. Of course, this was only a legend. Many martial artists were doubtful. A sword slash was able to create a huge river. If those two were to fight to the death, wouldn't they have destroyed the entire Shangmeng Mountain? But the only thing that could be confirmed was that there were indeed sword Dao experts who fought at Zhonglan River. It was said that the Tsonglan sword sect's founding ancestor saw the sword scars left behind when the experts fought here. It was then that he suddenly had an epiphany and his strength improved greatly. Thus he established the sect here, and after 1,000 years of development, it became one of the 7 sects and 8 schools, the Tsonglan sword sect. At this moment, within the Azure Water Sword sect's mountain gate, Shenbai was seated in the conference hall. Looking at the news from the Shen clan, his expression didn't have the slightest change. An Azure Water Sword sect disciple below him asked, "Senior brother, the Shen clan is still waiting for news outside. What should we do?" Shenbai expressionlessly waved his hand. "Go give them a sword with our Azure Water Sword sect's mark, and send them off the mountain." Shenbai knew why the people of the Shen family were here. It was just that he didn't want to have any relations with the Chen clan. He just casually tossed them a sword with the Azure Water Sword sect's insignia, and it was enough to intimidate them. Shenbai put down the news, and went straight to a courtyard in the back mountain of the Azure Water Sword sect. He respectfully knocked on the door and an old voice came from inside. "Come in." Shenbai pushed the door and entered. In the courtyard, there was an old man dressed in gray sitting on the ground. Although his beard and hair were all white and his face was old, his back was still straight without the slightest sign of stooping. His aura was extraordinary. There was a chessboard in front of the old man, but there was no opponent. He was actually playing chess with himself. This old man was the current Azure Water Sword sect's sect master. One sword sinks the river Lu Gongyuan. In the past, Lu Gongyuan supported the Azure Water Sword sect with his own strength. When he took over the sect in his prime, he once fought with someone on this Tsonglan River. The power of his sword temporarily cut off the flow of Tsonglan River, and sank his opponent to the bottom of the river. This was why he was known as One Sword Sinks the River. But the current Lu Gongyuan was already old. He was nearly 300 years old this year. Even if he had the cultivation of the martial Dao True Pellet realm, he couldn't withstand the erosion of time. Above the 5th level of Qi controlling realm was the 3 realms of spirit refinement. Those who could reach these 3 realms were all at the master level, and could support a top sect in the pugilistic world. All the sects that appeared on the pugilistic world's song had at least one martial Dao master, who reached the 3 realms of spirit condensation. The 3 realms of spirit condensation were martial Dao True Pellet, True Fire Spirit Refinement, and Heaven and Earth Mystic. At the first realm of martial Dao True Pellet realm, one's lifespan could already reach more than 300 years. In other words, Lu Gongyuan was now close to the end of his lifespan. In the past, Lu Gongyuan's name was on the reputation list. But now, Lu Gongyuan hadn't fought for more than 10 years, and had long been removed from the list. "Master." Shenbai bowed and sat in front of Lu Gongyuan. Seeing his last disciple that he had painstakingly nurtured, Lu Gongyuan's mouth revealed a hint of a smile. "Is there any confusion on the martial Dao?" Shenbai shook his head and said in a deep voice, "Master, 1 year ago, the person who killed my brother appeared in Wei County again. I want to borrow the power of the Azure Water Sword sect to go down the mountain to find him and kill him." Lu Gongyuan was silent for a moment, raised his head and looked into Shenbai's eyes. "In the pugilistic world, there are some things that you can't do just because you want to. Shenbai, you are my last disciple. When you stepped into the Azure Water Sword sect, I knew that you were the disciple I wanted. All these years, I restricted you to cultivate in the Azure Water Sword sect. Even though your strength has reached the physical invulnerability realm, I didn't let you go out to explore the pugilistic world. Do you know why?" Without waiting for Shenbai to answer, Lu Gongyuan said in a deep voice, "Because I want you to amaze the pugilistic world with a single brilliant feat. My Azure Water Sword sect has been silent for long enough. I am old, and the Azure Water Sword sect can only defend Wei County. But you are still young, and I am prepared to hand over the future of the Azure Water Sword sect to you. Among the younger generation of the pugilistic world, the strength of the physical invulnerability realm is indeed not bad, but it is still not enough. You are not Nye Donglu from the Morgue Manor. With the identity of the Morgue Manor's young master, you are famous for your smooth methods and entered the Longhu leaderboard before the age of 20. You are also not the prodigy young celestial master, Zhangqingjin from the Celestial Master's abode of Mount Longhu. When you were born, a ray of light shot into the sky and a thunder pattern appeared on your palm. You were immediately listed as the next Celestial Master's successor and monopolized the Longhu leaderboard for 17 years. You are not them, so you can only rely on your own hard work to amaze the world with a single brilliant feat before you condense the 3 flowers above your head. I will not let you fight because you only have one chance to fight. This time, you must let the entire pugilistic world remember you and let you enter the top 10 of the Longhu leaderboard. Taking a deep look at Shenbai, Lu Gongyuan said in a deep voice, "Only the reputation of the top 10 of the Longhu leaderboard can suppress your seniors. When I took you in as my last disciple, it caused a lot of dissatisfaction. I nurtured you as the sect master's successor, but you don't have the title of a successor. I can give you this title, but it will cause unrest in the Azure Watersword sect and cause everyone to be dissatisfied. Only when the day comes that you can truly bear this title will I officially give it to you." Shenbai took a deep breath. These were words that Lu Gongyuan had never said to him before, but he could vaguely feel it. When Lu Gongyuan took him in as a disciple, some of his seniors were already over 100 years old, and some were even close to 200 years old. These people were all elders of the Azure Watersword sect, but he had to call them seniors. These people also had disciples. Some were young, some were in the prime of their lives, and they all had the qualifications to compete for the successor of the Azure Watersword sect. But they had to call Shenbai martial uncle, so of course these people would not be convinced by him. Looking at Lu Gongyuan, Shenbai said in a deep voice, "Disciple understands, I will not go after Chu Xiao." Lu Gongyuan nodded with satisfaction. People in the pugilistic world are always helpless. Everything has to be considered for the big picture. Sometimes, even if it is the hatred of killing one's father or stealing one's wife, one must endure it. But at this moment, Shenbai suddenly said, "But Master, I cannot do anything, but I still want to ask the Azure Watersword sect to send out a portion of their disciples to kill Chu Xiao. If I turn a blind eye to my enemy passing by right under my nose, I will not accept it." This time, Lu Gongyuan did not stop him. He nodded and said, "Don't worry, I will arrange it." Shenbai was someone he fancied. Whether the Azure Watersword sect could rise again in the future would depend on him. This was the same as how his master nurtured him. It wasn't too difficult for the Azure Watersword sect to send people to pursue and kill a person within their capabilities. With the addition of the Azure Watersword sect, the people chasing after Chu Xiao changed from 3 to 4. Currently, Chu Xiao was hiding in the southern Shangmeng mountain. Whether or not they could repel the people from the Mortuary Manor and the northern Drifting Snow City would depend on this time. In the dense forest of the southern Shangmeng mountain, a Xiantian realm martial artist from the Azure Watersword sect was searching in boredom. This time, they were sent down the mountain to search for Chu Xiao. In fact, these disciples weren't very willing. The sect didn't give them any rewards, and this time it was purely voluntary work. And this time, the Azure Watersword sect made a huge mistake, which was they didn't understand Chu Xiao's strength. Wei Prefecture was a little far from northern Yan. If they wanted to collect information on Chu Xiao, they could still collect it. But this time, the Azure Watersword sect acted in a hurry, so they only obtained some rough information that was outdated. They still thought that Chu Xiao was only at the inner Aura realm. After all, when he made his move in the Tongzhou Prefecture, the surrounding people were ordinary people and low-level martial artists. When Chu Xiao intentionally concealed his presence, they couldn't see through Chu Xiao's true strength. Because of this, the martial artists that the Azure Watersword sect sent out weren't very strong. There were even blood condensation realm martial artists. If this was seen by the Mortuary Manor and the northern Drifting Snow City who understood Chu Xiao, sending these low-level martial artists to chase after Chu Xiao was basically sending Chu Xiao's head. Just as the Azure Watersword sect's martial artist was bored to death and searching, a black shadow suddenly flashed past his eyes. Just as the Azure Watersword sect's martial artist wanted to draw his sword, he felt as though his spirit had sunk into an abyss and was completely immersed within. Chapter 135. Late at night, In the dense forest of the southern Xiangmeng mountain, the group of 5 from the northern Xiangmeng city was carefully searching in the dense forest. They had heard about how Chu Xiu had instantly killed a physical invulnerability realm expert. Therefore, most of the martial artists were moving in groups of 10. Only his group was unlucky. Because the other groups had enough people, they were moving in groups of 5. But now that Chu Xiu was seeking his own death, he actually walked out of the northern Xiangmeng mountain and showed himself in the Tongzhou prefecture. This made them more certain of his location. In addition, the area of the southern Xiangmeng mountain was much smaller than the northern Xiangmeng mountain. As long as they continued searching for a few days, they would completely surround Chu Xiu. At that time, this troublesome task would be over. But at this moment, the 5 suddenly noticed movement in front of them. They immediately ran over and saw a martial artist dressed in blue holding a sword. He was only in the Xiantian realm. Seeing that this person was not Chu Xiu, the people from the northern Xiangmeng city heaved a sigh of relief. The physical invulnerability martial artist couldn't help but snort. "Who are you? What are you doing in the dense forest of the Xiangmeng mountain at night?" The martial artist shouted. "I should be the one asking you that. Do you know whose territory this is? How dare you be so arrogant here? You're simply courting death." Because it was late at night, the 5 people from the northern Xiangmeng city didn't notice the sluggish look in the martial artist's eyes. But when they heard this, the 5 people immediately exploded. The northern Driftsnow city was a hegemon-like existence in the northern lands. Even the generals of the northern Yan kingdom would have to give them face. As time went by, the martial artists from the northern Xiangmeng city were more or less infected with some violent and overbearing characters. Regarding this matter, the experts from the northern Xiangmeng city didn't correct it because they also had such characters. Now that this Xiantian realm martial artist dared to be so arrogant here, it immediately ignited the anger of the martial artist from the northern Xiangmeng city. Since when did a puny Xiantian realm martial artist dare to be so arrogant in front of him? The martial artist from the northern Xiangmeng city snorted. "I think you're the one courting death. The most important thing in Jianghu is to know the rules and know respect. Today, I will teach you what respect is." Just at this moment, the Xiantian martial artist actually pulled out the sword in his hand. This caused the eyes of the Outer Dipper realm martial artist from the northern drifting snow city to twitch. A martial artist of the innate realm actually dared to draw his sword against him. Was he overconfident, or was he simply blind, unable to see through the aura of the physical invulnerability realm? But no matter what, a puny Xiantian realm martial artist actually dared to draw his sword in front of him. This made the physical invulnerability realm martial artist of the northern fluttering snow city feel insulted. He had only intended to teach the other party a small lesson, but now he directly struck out with his palm, bringing with it an extremely dense chill. He was prepared to directly cripple the brat first. Xiantian Mang City. With and Xiantian World Mang City. With he had Mang City, Hang Mang City, Hang Mang City. His palm landed and Xiantian World Mang City seemed to have gone mad. Xiantian World Mang City didn't even use his sword art, and just thrust his sword at him. The Xiantian World Mang City martial artist's chest caved in, and a large amount of blood gushed out. The sluggishness in his eyes finally dissipated, and he regained his clarity. But just as he wanted to say something, he couldn't say a single word. Finally, he fell to the ground and breathed no more. The physical invulnerability martial artist from the northern Xiangmeng city looked at his hand in doubt, and then at the corpse. He felt that something was wrong. Was there something wrong with this kid's head? First, he was disrespectful to him. Then he didn't even dodge when he attacked. It was as if he was committing suicide. Right now, Chu Xiu was on a tree less than 10 feet away from them. His aura was silent to the extreme, just like a dead man. Looking at the scene below, Chu Xiu muttered in his heart, "They should be here soon." Just as this thought flashed through his mind, there was a commotion coming from afar. A physical invulnerability martial artist from the Azure Water Sword sect led 7 or 8 martial artists over. They were previously attracted by the traces that Chu Xiu intentionally left behind. But just now they heard the sounds of fighting, which was why they rushed over. But when they arrived, They saw the corpses of their Azure Water Sword sect martial artists. Junior brother. The physical invulnerability martial artist's expression suddenly changed. He pointed at the people from the northern Xiangmang city and shouted, "You people from the northern Xiangmang city have some guts. You actually dare to kill our Azure Water Sword sect's people in our territory. Do you really think our Azure Water Sword sect is a pushover?" The people from the northern Xiangmang city didn't know that the Azure Water Sword sect was pursuing Chu Xiu, but the Azure Water Sword sect knew about them. Both parties might have the same target, but their objectives were different. Therefore, there was no communication. Furthermore, the relationship between the Wei County's sects and the Northern Yan sects wasn't good. There was no need for communication. As a result, when the disciple from the northern Xiangmang city realized that he actually killed someone from the Azure Water Sword sect, he immediately cursed in his heart. The northern Xiangmang city and the Azure Water Sword sect were both part of the 7 sects and 8 factions. But in reality, the northern Xiangmang city had never placed the Azure Water Sword sect in their eyes. In the entire Azure Water Sword sect, except for the old Lu Gongyuan, the rest were all mediocre. When Lu Gongyuan could no longer pick up his sword, the Azure Water Sword sect would probably be squeezed out of the 7 sects and 8 factions. But no matter how weak the Azure Water Sword sect was, this was still the Wei County, which was also the Azure Water Sword sect's territory. Their own disciple was killed in their own territory. This was basically a provocation and an insult. If it was the northern Xiangmang city, they would probably be even more enraged. On top of the tree, Chu Xiu's eyes had already turned pitch black like a deep abyss. The heaven-extinguishing earth soul shift technique's prowess was pushed to the extreme, affecting the Azure Water Sword sect's martial artists and pushing their inner anger to the maximum. In the past, Chu Xiu only used the soul-shifting technique to affect one person. But now, he had to affect more than 10 people at the same time. Even if only 2 of them were physical invulnerability experts, the mental strength consumption was still significant. Therefore, when Chu Xiu used the soul-shifting technique, he simultaneously formed a seal with both hands and executed the fast and slow 9-words formula. Swordsman formula. Inner lion seal. Main recovery invincible. The qi within Chu Xiu's body was constantly circulating. The inner lion seal was suppressing his body, constantly transforming his inner qi into mental strength to maintain the consumption. The original use of the inner lion seal was to heal, or to suppress one's body during an intense battle, and prevent the injury from erupting. Now that Chu Xiu was using it to suppress his mental strength, it was somewhat effective. At this moment, the martial artist from the northern Xiangmang city also knew that the problem was huge, so he immediately said, "Brothers, please listen to me, this is actually a misunderstanding." "Misunderstanding my ass. You killed my Azure Water Sword sect's disciple, pay with your own life first." The leading Azure Water Sword sect martial artist didn't know why, but his heart was surging with anger. Originally, they were considered peaceful, but now they were even more irritable than the northern Xiangmang city's people. They immediately brandished their swords and fought with the northern Xiangmang city's people. The northern Xiangmang city's people initially planned to defend, but seeing that the other side didn't show any mercy, they decided to just kill. Their northern Xiangmang city's people didn't have a small temper. If the other side wanted to kill them, how could they still show mercy? As a result, both sides immediately fought to the death. After a few moves, blood had already been seen. At this moment, even without the influence of Chu Xiu's heaven-extinguishing soul shift technique, both sides were completely unable to separate. On the tree, Chu Xiu withdrew the heaven-extinguishing soul shift technique. His head was already covered in cold sweat, and there was even a slight tingling sensation in his head. Did I overexert my mental strength? Chu Xiu rubbed his head. The heaven and earth intersecting yin and yang great sorrow poem was truly worthy of being a 9-revolution class evil art. Even if it was just one of the cultivation techniques, the current Chu Xiu still couldn't fully control it. Once the heaven-extinguishing soul shift technique reached the great completion stage, it would have the prowess of soul shifting and could unknowingly strangle the opponent in the illusion. After taking a glance below, Chu Xiu immediately turned and left. With such a huge commotion here, It should be able to attract most of the martial artists in the southern Shangmeng Mountain. The rest would have to depend on the development of the situation. He believed that as long as the Azure Water Sword sect wasn't so cowardly, the Mortuary Manor and northern Shangmeng cities people would definitely not stay in Wei County. Early in the morning, Bai Qinhu and Meng Yuanlong looked at the dozens of corpses on the ground with a gloomy expression. They couldn't understand why their side would actually fight with the Azure Water Sword sect. Furthermore, it was on such a large scale. They had already inquired about the process of the battle. It was true that their side was rather reckless and didn't find out the details of the other party before making a move. But the Azure Water Sword sect's performance was a little too agitated. It was just the death of a Xiantian martial artist, and the other party wasn't willing to let it go. As a result, it evolved into a huge battle, and both sides lost dozens of people. After some time, Meng Yuanlong spoke in a deep voice. "I'm afraid this matter isn't going to end so easily." Bai Qinhu coldly snorted. "Of course I know that too. But the person has already been killed, so what? Furthermore, my northern Shangmeng city has also suffered a lot of casualties." Right at this moment, over 100 sword-wielding martial artists galloped over. The one in the middle looked to be over 60 years old, and carried a red and blue longsword on his back. He walked over with an angry expression. "It is Lu Gongyuan's first disciple, Flame Frost Sword Do Guangqin." Bai Qinhu and Meng Yuanlong squinted their eyes at the same time. This Do Guangqin was actually over 100 years old, and had a rather high status in the Azure Water Sword sect. He was definitely second only to Lu Gongyuan. Since the other party sent out their first disciple, it was obvious that they didn't come with good intentions. When they got closer, Bai Qinhu cupped his hands and said, "Brother Do, last night's incident was actually a misunderstanding. You..." Before he could finish, Do Guangqin interrupted. "Withdraw from Wei County within 3 days. Otherwise, my master will personally make a move. My master's sword has not been unsheathed for over 10 years. The people of the pugilistic world might have already forgotten that my master's sword can not only sink a river, but it can also slash a mountain." Chapter 136. Azure Water Sword sect's attitude was shocking. In fact, Azure Water Sword sect was infuriated. Not only did Mortuary Manor and northern Drifting Snow City enter the Wei Prefecture in large numbers, they didn't even inform them. Now they even dared to kill in Azure Water Sword sect's territory. They were simply looking down on them. If this incident happened to the Divine Martial sect or the other Northern Yen sects, they might give the Drifting Snow City of the extreme north a chance to explain, but the Azure Billow Sword sect wouldn't. The reason was simple. The Azure Billow Sword sect didn't have a good relationship with the major martial arts factions of the Northern Yen. In the past, the Northern Yen Imperial Court and the Northern Yen pugilistic world cooperated in many ways. The rise of Northern Yen, the counterattack against Eastern Qi and the destruction of the Wei Kingdom, turning it into the Wei Prefecture, were all thanks to the Northern Yen pugilistic world's major factions. As a sect in the Wei Prefecture, Azure Water Sword sect had some connections with the former Wei Kingdom's imperial court. Even when Azure Water Sword sect was at its peak, they couldn't do without the support of the Wei Kingdom's imperial court. As a result, the Wei Kingdom was destroyed and became the Northern Yan's Wei Prefecture. Azure Water Sword sect suffered a great loss in strength, and had many conflicts with the Northern Yen pugilistic world's factions. Now Azure Water Sword sect didn't directly make a move against them, which was already a sign of forbearance. This time, Chu Xiu dared to plot against both sides because he knew this, which was why he chose this method to break the stalemate. Of course, Chu Xiu had also thought of the worst scenario. Azure Water Sword sect might swallow this incident and admit defeat. But this probability was very small. For a sect of the Azure Water Sword sect's level, sometimes face was more important than anything else. If such a thing happened, Chu Xiu's strength had improved greatly. As long as he could find a chance to avoid Bai Qinhu and Meng Yuanlong, he was confident he could break out of the encirclement. But as for the price he would have to pay, Chu Xiu didn't dare to guess. Right now, the Azure Water Sword sect's attitude was incomparably domineering. Even with Bai Qinhu's irritable personality, he had no choice but to endure. In terms of strength, although this guy in front of him was also an expert in the oneness of heaven and man realm, his reputation in the Jianghu could not be compared to that of Bai Qinhu, the 13th master of drifting snow city in the extreme north. But Lu Gongyuan was representing the Azure Water Sword sect. Looking at Lu Gongyuan's attitude, if they didn't leave now, they might provoke Lu Gongyuan. Bai Qinhu gritted his teeth and said, "Let's go." This time, the far north's floating snow city, and the morgue could be considered to have suffered a great loss. Not only did they spend a fortune teller to deduce Chu Xiu's location, they also lost plenty of men during the pursuit of Chu Xiu and the conflict with the Azure Water Sword sect. It could be said that they suffered a double loss. Dou Guangchen coldly laughed. So what if it was the drift snow city of the extreme north? So what if it was the morgue? This was Wei County. Seeing the two factions retreating, Dou Guangchen waved his hand and led the Azure Water Sword sect's men away. Chu Xiu didn't see this scene. He dared to conceal his chi presence in front of some low-level martial artists and martial artists of the same rank, but he didn't dare to play such tricks in front of a oneness of heaven and man expert. At the oneness of heaven and man realm, one could use their own strength to sense the changes in heaven and earth. Their perception would also increase drastically. Chu Xiu didn't even dare to appear within 300 meters of such an expert. After waiting for a few days, Chu Xiu didn't find any traces of the two factions in the forest. He was then certain that the other party had retreated. As for the Blue Dragon Society, Chu Xiu didn't put them in his eyes. It wasn't because the Blue Dragon Society wasn't strong enough, but because the Blue Dragon Society didn't have enough members. The entire Heavenly Sin branch only had a little over 100 members. If they were all here to search for Chu Xiu, would the Blue Dragon Society still be able to complete their mission? As long as the Heavenly Sin branch leader wasn't an idiot, after seeing the Drift Snow City and the morgue retreating, he would also retreat. But what surprised Chu Xiu was that after the two factions retreated, the Azure Water Sword sect was still searching for him. They even sealed off most of the exits of the southern Mang Mountain, and patrolled back and forth. This made Chu Xiu frown. If there was only one faction, Chu Xiu was confident he could escape, but it would depend on his luck. If he chose to escape from the sealed area, there were only physical invulnerability realm martial artists. Even if there were a few more, Chu Xiu was confident he could escape. But if he encountered the 3-flower condensation, 5 chi condensation, or even the unity of heaven and man realm experts, Chu Xiu reckoned that even if he burst out with the fastest speed with the internal binding seal, the chances of escaping would be very small. Therefore, Chu Xiu simply stayed in the dense forest of the southern Mang Mountain. Anyway, he still had the elixirs and other cultivation resources that he accumulated when he was an assassin in the Blue Dragon Society. It would be enough for him to use for a long time. Right now, Chu Xiu had just stepped into the physical invulnerability realm. This period of time was just right for him to solidify his foundation. Inside the Azure Water Sword sect, Dou Guangchen arrived at Lu Gongyuan's residence and reported respectfully, "Master, the matter has been resolved. The morgue and the Drift Snow City have all retreated from Wei County." Lu Gongyuan nodded and said, "It's good that they have retreated. Guangchen, you have also seen it. All these years, our Azure Water Sword sect has been trapped in Wei County, and hasn't made a move in the pugilistic world for a long time. I'm afraid the other pugilistic world sects have long looked down on us. Bai Qinhu and Meng Yuanlong aren't newbies either. They all know the rules of the pugilistic world. Yet they brought a large number of people to Wei County to capture people, and didn't even give a single explanation to our Azure Water Sword sect. It's obvious that in their hearts, they don't even care about our Azure Water Sword sect." Dou Guangchen said in a deep voice, "Master, please be at ease. Junior Brother's talent is right there. In the future, when Junior Brother steps into the real pellet realm and becomes a martial Dao master, he will definitely be able to lead our Azure Water Sword sect out of Wei County and become famous in the pugilistic world." If Dou Guangchen's words were heard by other Azure Water Sword sect members, they would definitely be shocked. Because he was Lu Gongyuan's first disciple, the one with the highest qualifications and prestige in the Azure Water Sword sect apart from Lu Gongyuan. All the Azure Water Sword sect disciples knew that Do Guangqin had long been dissatisfied with Lu Gongyuan's favoritism toward Shenbai. In fact, Do Guangqin didn't even have a good attitude toward Shenbai, and even tried to suppress him. In the end, he actually said such words in front of Lu Gongyuan. Looking at Do Guangqin, Lu Gongyuan sighed and said, "Guangqin, it's been hard on you to be the bad guy in front of Shenbai all these years. To be honest, do you feel any regret? If there was no Shenbai, the position of the sect master would be yours." Do Guangqin smiled and said, "Master, you know that others might have this thought, but I definitely won't. Even when I decided to be the bad guy in front of junior brother and give him pressure, it was also me who suggested it. My life was saved by Master back then. If it wasn't for Master and the Azure Water Sword sect, I, Do Guangqin, would just be a small pickpocket bullied by the bullies in the Black Street. Who knows when I might be beaten to death. When I was learning martial arts, I had already passed the optimal period, causing my foundation to be unstable. Even though I am now at the peak of the 5th level of Qi controlling, I am still unable to draw in the power of heaven and earth to refine the martial Dao True Elixir. Right now, what my Azure Water Sword sect needs is someone who can support the entire sect and turn the tide. This person isn't me, it can only be junior brother. Everything I am doing now is not for junior brother, but for the Azure Water Sword sect." Lu Gongyuan sighed and said, "You have already repaid the kindness I showed you in the past. All these years, it is me and the Azure Water Sword sect that owes you." After sighing, Lu Gongyuan asked again, "Have you guys found Chu Xiu?" Do Guangqin shook his head and said, "I am only temporarily sealing the exit of the southern Death Mang Mountain. I have not officially started the search. After all, the southern Death Mang Mountain isn't considered small. With our Azure Water Sword sect's members, we won't be able to search all of them. Therefore, I am preparing to inform the other sects to help with the search." But at this moment, Lu Gongyuan said, "There is no need to search. Just send people to seal off the southern Death Mang Mountain first. After a few months, withdraw the people." Do Guangqin was astonished. "Why are you doing this? Isn't Chu Xiu junior brother's enemy? If we find him, we can take revenge for junior brother." Lu Gongyuan said indifferently, "It is precisely because Chu Xiu is Shenbai's enemy that I want to let him go this time. Ever since joining the Azure Water Sword sect, Shenbai's path has been too smooth. Or rather, he doesn't have any big goals. He only knows to wholeheartedly cultivate and amaze the world with a single brilliant feat, but he doesn't know how to take the first step. I have investigated Chu Xiu's information. He is the exact opposite of Shenbai. This person is completely from the wilderness. To be able to fight his way to his current strength, he is relying on his boldness and ruthlessness. He is even ranked 18th on the Dragon and Tiger rankings. This Chu Xiu was Shenbai's enemy, an obstacle on his path forward. The sect could remove this obstacle for him, but in this way, other than avenging his great hatred, what else could he obtain? Therefore, we cannot help him remove this obstacle. He needs to remove it himself. It can be said that this Chu Xiu is his stepping stone to enter the world and amaze the world with a single brilliant feat." Do Guangqin hesitated and said, "But Master, what if junior brother dies in the hands of this Chu Xiu?" Over the years, there were many people in Jianghu who were born in the wilderness but held high positions. For example, Nie Renlong of the Charity Village. In the past, a few Jianghu newbies had formed a brotherhood in the Charity Village. In the eyes of other Jianghu people, it was just a joke. I am afraid that junior brother will suffer in the hands of Chu Xiu. If he is unable to recover from this setback, then our Azure Water Sword sect's efforts will be wasted." Looking at the distance outside the door, Lu Gongyuan said indifferently, "There are so many wilderness in the world, but there is only one Nie Renlong. Moreover, I need Shenbai to amaze the world with a single brilliant feat. If he can't even deal with a single Chu Xiu and needs the sect to help him, then why should we spend so much effort to nurture him? If I only want to nurture a successor of the Azure Water Sword sect, then the current Shenbai is actually considered qualified. But now, I want to nurture a leader who can lead the Azure Water Sword sect to turn the tide. That Shenbai needs to be tempered far more than he can imagine." Chapter 137. Right now, Chu Xiu didn't know that his crisis had already been resolved. Even though it was resolved in a comical manner, he was used as a whetstone to hone his disciple, a stepping stone for the other party to become famous in the martial world. After staying in the dense forest of the southern Mang Mountain for several days, Chu Xiu realized that the Azure Water Sword sect only chose to seal off the exit of the southern Mang Mountain, and didn't choose to search the mountain. Chu Xiu was relieved and immediately entered the depths of the forest to cultivate in seclusion. On the path of martial arts, Chu Xiu didn't have a teacher, and was born from an unorthodox background. What he considered was actually very simple, just one word: become stronger. No matter what kind of cultivation technique, good or evil, as long as it could make Chu Xiu stronger, then everything would be fine. Among the cultivation techniques that Chu Xiu possessed, the strongest were actually the two parts of the heaven and earth converging yin and yang sorrowful prose, and the fast and slow 9 words formula. Chu Xiu understood that the heaven and earth converging yin and yang sorrowful prose was definitely a demonic technique that could shock the heavens and make the gods weep. A pity that even if Chu Xiu had the benefit of knowing the plot, it was useless. Because in the original plot, no one was able to gather all 7 cultivation techniques and form the complete version of the heaven and earth converging yin and yang sorrowful prose. Now, if Chu Xiu wanted to gather the complete version, he could only rely on luck, and it could even be said that the chances were very slim. As for the fast and slow 9 words formula, this cultivation technique that didn't appear in the original plot gave Chu Xiu a great reward. Any one of the fast and slow 9 words formula was an extremely powerful cultivation technique, and it could be arranged and combined at will. When all the effects were added together, it could be considered as a perfect cultivation technique. For example, when Chu Xiu fully activated the soul-shifting technique with the heaven extinguishing, earth extinguishing, and soul-shifting technique, he used the lion seal to suppress himself and prevent overexhaustion of his mental strength. This combination was very good. Therefore, during this period of seclusion, other than cultivating his own inner force and lengthening his gang qi, Chu Xiu focused on cultivating the fast and slow 9 words formula. He cultivated each style to a proficient or even proficient level. By the time Chu Xiu had cultivated the 9 words formula to the extreme, he would be able to unleash an even greater power by combining the 9 words into one. Although the 9 words formula only had 9 moves, it was actually 10. As he cultivated, Chu Xiu almost forgot the existence of time. He even forgot that he was still trapped in Shangmang Mountain. Half a year later, in the cave, Chu Xiu, who had been sitting in the same place for a month, suddenly opened his eyes, and a scarlet sharp light bloomed from his hand. The blood-refined god shield suddenly exploded. It was 3 meters long and directly slashed the wall. There was no sound. It was like a clay ox entering the sea, directly sinking into the stone wall. During this half a year of cultivation, other than familiarizing himself with the fast and slow 9 words formula, Chu Xiu used the rest of the time to cultivate his inner force gang qi. Currently, Chu Xiu's blood-refined god shield could already burst out 3 meters. Although the improvement wasn't doubled, but in fact, a 3-meter-long gang qi had already surpassed 80% of the martial artists in the pugilistic world. Right now, he was only considered to be at the middle stage of the physical invulnerability realm, not even at the advanced stage. Dusting off the dust on his body, Chu Xiu concealed his qi presence and silently scouted towards the edge of the southern Shangmang Mountain. What surprised Chu Xiu was that he didn't even see a single Azure Wave Sword sect martial artist. But soon after, Chu Xiu felt relieved. After estimating the time, it had already been half a year since he was pursued. The Azure Wave Sword sect disciples also needed to cultivate. Just because of Shunbai's words, the entire Azure Wave Sword sect had to guard the southern Shangmang Mountain for half a year. Shunbai probably didn't have such a big influence. Even if the Azure Wave Sword sect master made such a decision, the other disciples would still carry it out, but they would still be dissatisfied. Since the Azure Wave Sword sect had already retreated, Chu Xiu naturally wouldn't delay any further. He immediately left the southern Shangmang Mountain and headed towards the direction of Eastern Qi. He was prepared to enter Eastern Qi first before anything else. Right now, Chu Xiu was still in the Azure Wave Sword sect's territory. Only by leaving the Wei County would he be truly safe. Hence, after descending the mountain, Chu Xiu changed his clothes and dressed up a little before heading straight for Eastern Qi. With Chu Xiu's current speed, he only took 7 days to arrive at the border between the Wei County and Eastern Qi. But after stepping into a small town, Chu Xiu felt something was amiss. Actually, something was amiss. This feeling had been present since a few days after Chu Xiu descended the mountain. It was as though someone had discovered him. This feeling would only be felt when he was in a crowded city, but the other party didn't make a move. Even though Chu Xiu's spiritual force had greatly increased after cultivating the soul-shifting technique, he was still unable to ascertain who was watching him when there were so many people around him. That person, or those people, were definitely well-trained and wouldn't expose their expressions to Chu Xiu's senses. Hence, Chu Xiu guessed that someone must have discovered him, but the person who discovered him wasn't strong enough. They only dared to observe him in the dark and crowded places, and followed him along the way. They didn't dare to directly appear in front of him. Chu Xiu could escape into the dense forest again, but if he wanted to enter the border of Eastern Qi, he would have to pass through these few small towns at the border. No matter what, he wouldn't be able to pass through. Now that Chu Xiu had stepped into this small town, the feeling instantly intensified. The other party even had a feeling of actively leaking their presence for him to detect. This presence was very strong, and the other party should have one more person, an expert at least in the physical invulnerability realm. Chu Xiu was actually somewhat familiar with this presence. Secretly frowning, Chu Xiu pretended not to notice and continued walking. After a while, the strong presence disappeared, leaving behind a more ordinary presence that was faintly discernible. It should be observing him from afar. Chu Xiu turned around and walked towards the place where the strong presence had leaked out. It was a small alley at the corner of a corner, and there was a hidden dart stuck in the wall. The dart was gold in color, and its body was slender. The tail of the dart was like a lifelike dragon's tail. It was extremely eye-catching. Chu Xiu's hand moved, and he silently kept the dragon tail soul-hunting dart into his arms. He couldn't help but reveal a strange look in his eyes. He had already recognized the owner of this dragon tail soul-hunting dart. It was Tangya. Previously in the Heavenly Sin branch, Tangya had a habit of playing with small, delicate hidden weapons in his hands. This dragon tail soul-hunting dart was one of them. If it was Tangya, then Chu Xiu knew who was secretly following him. It should be someone from the Heavenly Sin branch. It seemed like he had guessed wrong. The Heavenly Sin branch leader's narrow-mindedness exceeded Chu Xiu's expectations. The other party knew that the blood jade crystal had already been refined by Chu Xiu, and that staying here would affect the development of the Blue Dragon Society. Yet he still didn't hesitate to kill Chu Xiu. Only those assassins from the Heavenly Sin branch could hide in the crowd and monitor him, even though they were weaker than him. Moreover, they didn't lose him when he was hurrying. After all, these were the basic skills of an assassin. It was just that the people who followed Chu Xiu in the past were only at the Xiantian realm, so they didn't dare to show themselves. This time, however, Tangya came personally. Of course, what made Chu Xiu even more confused was why Tangya took the initiative to expose himself. Right now, Tangya's actions were very obvious. He was giving him a hint, telling him that the Blue Dragon Society was coming to kill him, and telling him to run for his life. However, the crux of the problem was that he didn't seem to have any relationship with Tangya in the Heavenly Sin branch. Among the assassins in the Heavenly Sin branch, the ones who had a good relationship with Chu Xiu were the Ghost Hand King and Fire Slave. As for Tangya, they had only cooperated a few times. They could talk, but their relationship wasn't that good. Why did Tangya take the initiative to warn him? Chu Xiu suddenly remembered that the Heavenly Sin branch leader had once chosen between him and Tangya. Who would be the scapegoat to attract the firepower? Could it be that Tangya had guessed this matter? However, this wasn't the time to think about this. A cold light flashed in Chu Xiu's eyes. It was indeed time to resolve the matter of the Heavenly Sin branch. It was reasonable for the northern floating snow city and the Morgue village to hunt him down. After all, it was Chu Xiu who snatched the food from the tiger's mouth and snatched it from the hands of these two factions. However, as for the Heavenly Sin branch leader, He was the one who first schemed against Chu Xiu. In the end, Chu Xiu saw through it and schemed against him instead. Since the Heavenly Sin branch leader wanted to be relentless, Chu Xiu naturally wouldn't forget this grudge. After lowering his head and thinking for a while, the corner of Chu Xiu's mouth suddenly revealed a trace of a gloomy smile. This caused the assassin of the Blue Dragon Society, who was secretly monitoring Chu Xiu, to suddenly shiver. When he thought of the terrifying achievements of this person in the Heavenly Sin branch, he couldn't help but reveal a trace of panic in his eyes. He tried his best to maintain his facial expression as he quietly disappeared into the crowd. In a day's time, Chu Xiu walked to many places in this small town. It seemed as though he had left something behind, but it also seemed as though he was wandering aimlessly. This caused the assassin of the Blue Dragon Society, who was monitoring Chu Xiu, to feel extremely strange. When night fell, Chu Xiu walked into a small tavern. This caused the assassin of the Blue Dragon Society to immediately let out a sigh of relief. Calculating the time, the adult should have already arrived. After this, there was nothing for him to do. The sky was already dark. Apart from Chu Xiu, there were no other customers in the tavern. After ordering a few dishes and a pot of yellow wine, Chu Xiu had already stayed here for 4 hours. The tavern's manager looked at the sky and couldn't help but want to chase him away. However, when he stood up, before he could say anything, Chu Xiu took out a gold ingot and threw it in front of him. The manager bit the gold ingot with his teeth in disbelief. Such a big piece of gold was worth more than 10 taels. It was enough to buy a few taverns. "Dear customer, do you need me to make a few more dishes for you?" The manager jogged all the way to Chu Xiu's side and smiled flatteringly. Chu Xiu waved his hand and said, "Let's go. I want to stay here for the night. There's no need to close the door." When the manager heard this, he immediately packed up his things and went back to sleep. With such a big piece of gold, even if Chu Xiu tore down his tavern, he wouldn't care. After waiting for the manager to leave for an hour, Chu Xiu poured a cup of wine and said indifferently, "We are all old acquaintances. There is no need to hide anymore. Come out." You're tuning in to the Echoes of the Heart YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.